Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me once again today, and welcome to an interesting little Dominions 5 discussion. This is a commissioned video. My good friend and supporter Perun, who's played in several games with me and has now placed this request, wanted me to talk about thugging, since I'm so interested in it. But more importantly, he wanted me to talk about early game thugging and counter thugging, because in the early game you will sometimes run into this situation where you really either want an effective thug of your own to do some specific thing, or you want a way to counter an enemy early thug or super combatant. For example, a Titan. Normally, of course, as I've said before, I don't really recommend Titans as pretender gods, but there are some ways in which they can work, and this is one of those contexts. If you have, who is it that I'm looking for? I'm looking for a Titan. If you have a Titan chassis, a decent one, of which it's somewhat hard to tell sometimes, but for example, the Titan of War and Wisdom, let's take this as a basic example. The Titan of War and Wisdom is actually an okay super combatant chassis, because high hit points for a unit, decent starting protection, so you don't need to forge armor necessarily, good stats, 2 attacks, one of which is like 5 and so can repel the owl attack very effectively, and has fear, so it can cause people to run away. Or if you have the Son of Nephil, who is basically just a Nephil giant, but way more so. Or if you have, which is the one that I'm thinking of? The Titan of the, let's sort by magic, because I'm thinking of a nature magic chassis here. Not the Titan of the Hunt, not the Titan of Love, the Anunnaki of Growth and Rebirth, who has a built-in Vine Shield effect, so anyone attacking him gets automatically entangled. With some decent equipment, the Anunnaki of Love and Rebirth, who is available to many nations, can be a very effective counter-thug if you're losing a war. This guy can fight off armies pretty effectively with some pretty basic gear. So, in this video, I want to talk about what kind of forging you need in order to build an effective thug in the early game, and what kind of chassis you need to do that. Now, first off, here's the difference between an early game and a late game thug. An early game thug can only do basically one job, and even that can only do moderately effectively. The main advantage of higher levels of construction is that your options open up. At construction level 2, you can build certain kinds of thugs that are actually quite effective, but there are other things that you simply can't do at this level of construction. And many of those involve countering true super combatants. At construction level 6, you can build thugs that can kill super combatants. At construction level 2, it's a lot harder. So, at construction level 2, what you have available are real basic items. You have the trinket armors, the black steel armor, and the black steel sword, which is just a basic 1-attack stat boosting weapon. And the Black Steel Tower Shield, which is a very powerful shield but can't be used by mounted units, which limits its applicability a little bit. You've got Boots of Giant Strength, which gives you a strength buff. You don't have a lot of the key thugging items. A lot of the key items to making very reliable thugs come online at construction level 4. Or construction level 6. For example, at construction level 4, you've got... Let's sort them up by construction level 4. At construction level 4, you've got the Boots of the Messenger, which are a staple of the genre. You've got the Ring of Regeneration, also a staple. You have the Serpent Kriss, which is a great anti-super combatant weapon if they don't happen to have a lot of poison resistance. You'll have to forgive me for losing my words and or my mind. You've got the Vine Shield, another very, very powerful item. The Eye Shield, which is kind of a less powerful version, but still useful. So at construction level 4, well, actually, the Eye Shield comes at construction level 2. But at construction level 4 up here, you've got a lot of the kind of the staples in nature magic. You've also got the Frostbrand, which is probably the cheapest and earliest general applicability thug weapon, which is real reliable, because this small area cold effect just fires off every time you attack, even if you miss. It's just an auto effect. Now, you do have the fire version at construction 2, which is the Mace of Eruption, but the Mace of Eruption's Flame Eruption attack is, first of all, weaker, and secondly, only happens on hit, So you have to actually make contact with the Mace of Eruption in order to get that AoE effect. And the Firebrand is construction 6 and costs twice as many gems. It's more powerful than the Frostbrand, but more expensive and comes later on. So the Frostbrand is a staple early thugging item because of that AoE damage. But if you don't even have construction 4, if you're only at construction 2, then you're left with much more limited options. You don't have the weapons that make thugs very effective at clearing large numbers of units. You don't have the items that make them, that allow them to reinvigorate endlessly. So you've got to pick your targets a lot better. So in the early game, thugs are good at, or can be good, depending on the chassis you have available, can be good at light province defense raiding against like less than 6 province defense. They can be good at potentially assassinating enemy commanders with attack rear orders, if they have air magic especially, or if they can natively fly. And they can be good at countering powerful enemy units. So for example, if early game your enemy is rushing you with Blessed Dai Oni, or if they're bringing their Pretender God into your territory or something like that, thugs geared with early game gear can be very effective countermeasures to that. So let's talk about those situations. Some super combatants have like built-in counters. The Dai Oni is probably a perfect example, because the Dai Oni has a built-in counter in the fact that it is a demon. Let's pull the Dai Oni up. Dai Oni, it's not a pretender, it's in a unit. Okay, so Dai Oni, recruitable for early age Yomi, very scary stats, very scary magic paths, has a couple of ranged attacks. It has the Javelin, it can throw flames, and it has the Nodachi, which is an excellent stat boosting item, which also has a base length of 2, and that goes up to 3 for the Dai Oni, if I recall correctly, because it's large. Heavy protection. And overall very, very scary. Plus can be blessed, and Yomi tends to take just a hellish bless. However, the Dai Oni is a demon. And since it's a demon, it's vulnerable to this. This is probably the most well-known, the most famous case of super combatant hard counter in the game. The Holy Scourge does triple damage versus undead and demons. It starts off with 6 damage, and remember, that's added to strength. So let's look at a potential thug chassis. Let's look at, who has good thugs? Actually, let's look kind of a lame thug, just to drive the point home, okay? Let's look at Early Age Ulm. Early Age Ulm has these super cheap warrior chiefs, which have no magic paths, and nothing special about them except that they are a cheap human dude with stealth. And they have decent stats, okay? If you give a warrior chief a Holy Scourge, he does 19 damage. He gets 2 attacks. And at attack plus 5, so his attack is 18. So he's very likely to hit. So doing 19 damage, and then that's triple. That's tripled before anything. So right off the bat, it's actually 57 damage per hit. And he gets 2 hits. In other words, a warrior chief with a Holy Scourge, if he gets into melee contact with a Dai Oni, if he gets the first attack, the odds are he's actually going to kill the Dai Oni outright. Or at least the odds are decent that he's going to kill the Dai Oni outright. That's a 75 gold unit with a 5 gem item, versus a 490 gold slow to recruit capital only unit. And it doesn't actually really matter what gear the Dai Oni has. The only exception is if the Dai Oni has repel gear, is geared to specifically repel incoming attacks, in which case he might be able to do that and survive that way. But, then you just send 3 warrior chiefs. He's very unlikely to be able to repel them all, in which case the Dai Oni will just get clubbed to death by this specially designed anti-demon weapon. More generally, in the early game, an actual early game super command is likely to be based around either inherent abilities of some kind, like the inbuilt Vine Shield, or Berserk plus a high prot, or something like that. It's very likely to be a Pretender God, basically. Or it'll be built around Repel. Building thugs around Repel has become a lot easier than it used to be with the Repel changes, mainly because of the existence of the Enchanted Pike, I would say. Repel, in case you need reminding, Repel works by allowing you, if you have a long weapon, a weapon longer than the weapon attacking you, to make an attack roll against your opponent's defense while their attack is incoming. So after they've essentially announced their attack or rolled their attack, but before they actually do damage, you get to make an attack roll against their defense if you have a longer weapon. And if that succeeds, you force them to make a morale check. I don't know exactly what the morale check is against, but I believe it's against the damage that you roll on your attack. So they make an attack, you make an attack back. If you hit them, you force them to make a morale check against, as I said, I believe your rolled damage. And if they fail that morale check, the attack just stops. They don't hit you. If they succeed in the morale check, they take 1 damage and they can go on to hit you. But as I said, if they fail, they just don't get to hit you at all. So, especially if you're a large creature, like a Titan, and you have an enchanted pike, so you're large, it's effectively length 6, because it gets +1 length for being wielded by a large creature. It also gives you +3 to attack. So, if I recall correctly, Lucid Tactics, in a recent video, actually had a kind of a famous example of this. His Fomorian opponent had a pretender god who was, I forget what he was, I think he was a Lord of the Forest. In any case, a Titan pretender god. And he was geared to repel. I forget if he'd used an enchanted pike or one of the other items that have very high length to do it. But he was geared with a long weapon, which gave an attack bonus. And on top of that, he had some of the other construction level 2 items, like the Burning Pearl gives you +4 attack. So if you're building a Repel, Super Combatant, or Thug, the Burning Pearl gives you a significant increase to your abilities. You can also have, there's a blood item, the Ring of the Warrior, which gives +5 attack. So if you have blood, you can do that. In fact, you can stack these both to get +9 attack out of your miscellaneous slots if you don't need them for something else. There's also, what else is there that gives an attack bonus at construction 2? That might be it. That might be all that gives an attack bonus at construction 2. Because I don't think any of the earth items do. Because weapons only give an attack bonus to their particular attack. A Greatsword of Sharpness actually works okay for this as well, although even for a Titan, it's not quite long enough to function. A Halberd of Might could be better, but frankly, the Enchanted Pike is the best. It's long enough that if you're a Titan wielding an Enchanted Pike, you can repel anyone in the game, and it gives you, as I said, +3 attack. So, something like this. If you have these 3 items stacked up, you have +12 to your attack. In this case, that would give the Lord of the Forest an attack skill of 25. With attack skill 25, he's very likely to be able to repel several attackers in a row. In fact, he might be able to be completely surrounded and still repel everyone around him. On top of that, what you can do is sacrifice one of these, probably the Burning Pearl, and put a Stone Bird in one of your miscellaneous slots. That increases your defense, so your defense skill between the Enchanted Pike and the Stone Bird is now up to 15, and then you can swap out armor or what have you in order to get that even higher. And the Stone Bird can also repel, because it, once again, is length 5, and you're allowed to repel with every weapon you have. Also, the Stone Bird is an intrinsic weapon, so it doesn't incur dual wielding penalties, and you can use it even when you have a 2-handed weapon on. So with that, you now have 2 repel checks versus every attack that comes in against you. At attack skill, I think it's only 21 now. 5, 8, 13, yeah, 21. You're very likely to be able to repel a ton of attacks. And that's what happened to Lucid. I only watched a few episodes of that series, but basically this guy, I think it was a Lord of the Forest. I don't recall exactly. In any case, the Fomorian Pretender God was just going around repelling all the attacks and killing his armies until he found a way around it. So that's one way, if you have the appropriate chassis, you can build an early game Thug that's actually very effective. Now, it's usually a Council of Desperation, because you're using your Pretender God for it. But if you are playing Lemuria, specifically, you have a hilariously overpowered option. The Lemur Consul is a summonable unit for Lemuria. Revive Lemur Consul. They have this spell from the start of the game. All it requires is Death 3 and 25 Death Gems, and Lemuria gets a ton of Death Gems natively. The Lemur Consul is especially notable because A, he has Fear, B, he's Sacred, C, he starts with attack skill 16, and D, he has magic power. Magic power increases your attack skill. So if you're in Magic 3, this is one of the reasons Lemuria always takes Magic 3, incidentally. If you're in Magic 3, his attack skill is 19. Since he's Sacred, you can take a Fire Bless, and you should, because you should have a ton of points, which can boost his attack skill by a further about 4 points, so we're up to 23 here. Then you give him an Enchanted Pike, now he's at 26. Then you give him a Burning Pearl, now he's at 30. He's literally attack skill 30. A Lemur Consul with an Enchanted Pike at attack skill 30 can repel his way through armies with no trouble, and if he ever does take hits, he also has 19 protection and 30 hit points, and is ethereal. So he's just not going to die, and then if he does die, guess what? He's immortal. This is one of the reasons, and one of the most minor reasons, I would say, that Lemuria is considered radically overpowered. Well, not the most minor, but a pretty minor reason that Lemuria is considered overpowered. For reference, if we're talking about thug summons and balance, for reference, keep in mind that Hallownest, the mod nation that Herdalos has created, which I think he and I and everyone watching agree is by no means underpowered, has a 25 Death Gem summon, which requires Death and Astral Cross paths, and it summons an immortal thug that is not sacred or ethereal, or has magic power, or causes fear. And does have magic paths, but requires 100 experience in order to get those magic paths, and doesn't have any priest paths. So, you know, I just food for thought. In any case, we're getting off topic there. So, the Repel Thug is one thing that you can do very early in the game. Now, let's say you're looking for a thug to counter an enemy thug. You have this enemy super combatant or thug or something coming in against you, and you really want to handle it early. Your options are a little bit limited. In terms of construction 2, you don't have a whole lot of options to you. You do have the Rabbit Foot Charm, and you have the Great Sword of Sharpness. And this is probably the combination that I would say is most generally applicable. So the Rabbit Foot Charm gives you Twist Fate, which means the first time you get hit and would die, you don't. I think you also have, don't you also have it level 2, the... I don't know why this is doing this. It's messing up. Yes, you have the Pendant of Luck. The Pendant of Luck is actually, to be honest, better than the Rabbit Foot Charm for this purpose. If you could stack both if you want to. But the Pendant of Luck is a 75% chance to live when you would die. Twist Fate just negates the first hit against you. I said that wrong the first time. And the Great Sword of Sharpness is a very high damage, stat boosting, armor piercing weapon. So against early game thugs and super combatants who tend to lean heavily on either defense or protection, or possibly both, the Great Sword of Sharpness does a great job of negating both of those. And it's cheap. You can have counter thugs, even relatively low stat ones, equipped with a Pendant of Luck and a Great Sword of Sharpness, 10 gems each, and those guys can live a surprisingly long time with a little bit of good rolling, and do quite a bit of damage. The only real easy, simple counter to that is to have a super combatant with a ton of attacks, which is fairly unlikely early on in the game. So for counter building, those guys are great. The Axe of Sharpness is, it's not actually showing me the Axe of Sharpness there. Astral Armor and Shields I would stay away from just because they don't give you a whole lot. The Enchanted Shield isn't the worst option because it does have a high parry value of 7. But beyond that, I wouldn't really use these guys for thugging. I would, however, use Main Gouge of Parrying. This is a defensive option. The Main Gouge of Parrying gives you plus 6 defense, plus it gives you a secondary attack. So it's, in many ways, unless you're worried about arrows, it's actually better than many shields. Because it gives you the same defense as a shield, if not slightly higher, and it gives you an attack, so it increases the number of attacks that you have, which is a very valuable ability early in the game. For counter-thugging, as I said, your options are a little bit limited early on. You've got the Great Sword of Sharpness, you've got the Pendant of Luck. That's a decent combination. You do have this interesting option, which is the... Stop doing that. The Ice Mist Scimitar. The Ice Mist Scimitar gives you pretty decent stat boosts, plus resist cold. And it inflicts armor negating fatigue damage in the square that it hits. So if you have a high defense thug, like a Vanjarl, or somebody else like that, or somebody with air magic who can cast Mist Form and Mirror Image on themselves, if you have a thug that you're pretty sure can drag the fight out for several rounds, the Ice Mist can actually be quite a potent effect. Now, the Ice Mist Scimitar, I say that 5 times fast, doesn't do a ton of damage, but it does inflict this fatigue. So you can mix somebody with an Ice Mist Scimitar in with a small army or another couple of thugs who are geared to do damage, and he can apply this fatigue effect to slow the enemy down and lower their stats, because as fatigue stacks up, your effective stats, including your protection, go down. That can be handy. Beyond that, none of this stuff is really all that interesting. Shout out, however, to Flask of Holy Water. If you have sacred non-priest thugs, which some nations do have, the Flask of Holy Water lets you apply your bless to them without having to send an actual priest along with them. This is important for example, Makone, because polemarches are sacred but not priests. There are other examples in the game as well. In terms of other Construction 2 items, a lot of Construction 2 items are basically for specific uses. So we've talked about general counter-thugging. For specific uses, a lot of Construction 2 items are a godsend, actually. For example, the Copper Plate. If you're fighting a nation that has a lot of lightning access or a lot of air magic access, a Copper Plate armed thug can be vital because he gets 25 shock resistance. It's not great armor, it's only 13 body prot, but that 25 shock resistance means that they can usually survive being hit by a Thunderstrike. You can combine that with, where to go, a Ring of Tamed Lightning. That pushes your shock resistance up to 40. That means that you're actually statistically likely to take no damage from being hit by a Thunderstrike, which is an incredibly potent counter ability to have in your arsenal. There are similar items to provide, not armor necessarily. The Copper Plate is, I think, almost unique in how powerful a resistance it provides. But similar to the Ring of Tamed Lightning, there are also rings that resist cold damage and fire damage. And so it's worth keeping those in your back pocket for when your opponent starts pulling out evocations of that kind, or area damage spells of that kind, or even, deploys a thug. If they've out-construction researched you, deploys somebody armed with a firebrand or something, you can pull out some guy wearing, like, fire plate and a ring of fire for total fire resistance of 20. Or even put on a dragon helmet, actually, instead of fire plate, I would say. Fire plate's not great, dragon helmets are really good. Morale bonus, fire resistance bonus, and then you slap a ring of fire on there. Now he's immune to firebrands, like almost completely immune to firebrands. Actually, the AOE fire effect just won't hurt him. If you're gearing a thug to go on the offensive on Construction 2, you have to be more careful because you don't have great offensive options. What you do have is, I would say, the most important path for that use is definitely nature, and secondarily, probably earth or astral. We've already talked about repel thugs, but more generally speaking, actually, let me focus on nature first. Nature has a few items that are really, really valuable for raiding or early attacking. The Horned Helmet is a high protection helmet that also gives you an extra attack. You really do want to stack multiple attacks in order to clear province defense or such, in case you run into a province where they've dropped 11 or 16 PD in an effort to trap your thug. Having 3 or 4 attacks is very valuable for cutting through those guys. You can have an Eye Shield at Construction Level 2. It's a little bit expensive. It's not as good as a Vine Shield, but it does force anybody who attacks you to make a magic resistance roll in order to avoid losing an eye. And of course, if they fail a roll twice, then they lose both eyes and go blind. Losing one eye is, if I recall correctly, a -3 penalty to attack, defense, and precision. Losing both eyes is -9. So at that point, they're really not a threat to anybody. The Eye Shield can be useful at this lower levels, but like I said, it's not as good as a Vine Shield, and it costs the same. So once you can forge Vine Shields, I would not forge Eye Shields anymore. Horned Helmet's good. Eye Shield is decent, although not the very, very best. Gloves of the Gladiators seem like they ought to be good since they give you 4 attacks, but they're not. For one thing, they're very short range. Like, they don't have a range listed here. If I recall correctly, their range is 0. Yeah, that didn't tell me. Their range is 0, I think, because they're just punching, literally. and the multiple attacks are all on one target. So, not super great, to be honest. For early cheap armor, the Chithoronic Lion Pelt is far from the worst. It gives you both body and head protection, and that head protection, does, I think, stack with a helmet. Plus, it only costs 5 gems total, and if you're Machaka, you get a little bit of a discount on it, so that's kind of neat. The Cat Charm can be useful if you're building a defense thug, somebody who's going to rely on his defense score, because it gives you +4 defense for your miscellaneous slot. It is, however, once again, expensive, and that's kind of the common theme with a lot of items, especially low construction items. What I will say is, you can build a very, very effective thug by having a horned helmet and 2 main gauches of parrying. That increases your defense by 12 from the main gauches of parrying. It lowered by 1 from the horned helmet, so it's a net of +11. But a net of +11 is often enough. On top of that, you can then put on a bracer of protection, or possibly 2. Those increase both your body and head prop by 2 and your defense score by 2. So if you have 2 of these, that's another +4. You're now looking at like +13 defense. That's enough. Now this is a 20-25 gem combination, so you better be getting some value for that much money. But for the specific job of being able to stand in the middle of a bunch of people attacking you and not carrying, this is pretty decent. You can also have 1 main gouge and 1 eye shield. That'll give you a high defense value, +11 and then +4 there. And whenever people miss you, they'll still have to make that magic resistance check to avoid losing their eyes. And so you can pretty quickly blind everyone around you. This, by the way, I think I may have talked about this before. This is why the Kami of the Sun is actually a decent expander. It doesn't really look like she would be, but if you look at her, the Kami of the Sun has the eye loss effect, and actually her eye loss effect is more powerful than the eye shields. She blinds people straight up. She does not have the lose one eye and then the other effect. She just takes both eyes immediately. So the Kami of the Sun, who is armed with a Nodachi as base and so can repel, can use her attack skill to repel with the Nodachi, and then the people that she repels go blind. Also, she has Awe. Awe is a very powerful defensive ability. Unfortunately, it's not really possible to get it at construction level 2, I don't believe. I think you need at least construction level 4. Yeah, I think so. Items that grant Awe by themselves are fairly rare. There is also another method of getting Awe, which is if you have items granting you extra leadership that pass a certain margin, you automatically get Awe 1. And I believe that margin is 100. If you have items that give you extra leadership that stack up to 100, they will give you extra Awe. And there's a whip that gives you extra leadership. I don't think it's the rat tail. The rat tail just gives you Taskmaster. There's a whip that gives you a whole bunch of extra leadership. There are a couple of helmets that give you extra leadership. You can stack those items up and end up with Awe on a unit. It's not really worth it in terms of thugging because it takes too many slots to get Awe 1. But if you have a chassis that has Awe, or if you use the Shield of Gleaming Gold, which grants Awe, then you can stack that very effectively with Fear as a defensive boost, or you can stack it with something like high defense score in general to prevent people from attacking you effectively. One other interaction that people might not know about right now, or at least not everybody might know about. Bracers of protection count as a piece of armor. So they give you 2 body and 2 head protection and then +2 defense. This is interesting because of the spell Legions of Steel, which applies to all pieces of armor, and it increases the prot granted by each individual piece of armor by 3. Now I hope you're seeing what the thing there is. Bracers of protection, if you cast Legions of Steel on somebody wearing them, go from providing 2 body and 2 head armor protection to providing 5 of each, and that stacks cleanly with every other piece of armor in the game. So if you have, for example, a Black Templar of Late Age Ulm, who starts off with Prot 23. and you give him 2 bracers of protection, his protection is then up to 27, which is very high. If you cast Legions of Steel on him, it goes up to 33. Needless to say, 33 protection is very, very hard to get through. because your 2 miscellaneous slots now add straight up 10 protection. You can use that to make somebody who can chew through armies of low damage units pretty effectively. That kind of interaction it's fun. It's not it works even better if you have an actual like magic using earth thug who can do it to himself. Like if you summon a Troll King, you can give him some magical armor like Armor of Knights or something, and Bracers of Protection. That's late game, of course. That's construction level 6. But it can be kind of funny to push somebody up to 40 prop that way. In any case, the thing to keep in mind about thugs in the early game is that even more than in the late game, you really have to focus on what exactly you want them to do. Because with construction level 2, your options are very limited and you have to pick very carefully. You don't have the ability to gear a thug to operate independently in the way that you can in the late game. And obviously, late game thugs are still vulnerable to counters, but you can gear somebody up to such an extent that you can be pretty sure if all he's running into is troops, he will win. That's not true with construction level 2. It becomes more true with construction level 4, because construction level 4 opens up Frostbrands, which are a staple, absolutely the earliest, cheapest, and most efficient area of effect square clearing damaging weapon. Construction level 4 also opens up things like the Dragon Scale Mails, which give you morale bonuses, decent protection, and elemental resistances, all of which are very handy. It opens up Shields of Gleaming Gold, Charcoal Shields. Actually, no, I think Shields of Gleaming Gold are 6. It opens up Elemental Armor for heavy thugs, which gives you resistance to every element plus very high protection at the cost of encumbrance. It also opens up Vine Shields, which are, once again, a critical staple of efficient thugs just because of that Entangle effect. The Entangle effect is super, super powerful for chewing through armies. If you give somebody at construction level 4 a Vine Shield and a Frostbrand, 15 gems, and if he's a decent thug chassis, he can now solo most provinces. He can even take on small armies, just because they won't be able to effectively hit and damage him, and he'll be clearing them out, 1 square at a time. Other slightly less common stratagems. You can give somebody the Astral Serpent if you want him to specifically counter thug against another super combatant. If they don't have a whole bunch of poison resistance and or a lot of HP and regeneration, the Astral Serpent will kill them, because it is an armor negating attack. It does with +3 attack. It's on top of your normal weapons because it's an intrinsic weapon, and as soon as it hurts them, it gives them 35 poison, plus, of course, the DRN roll. So they're very likely to die of that poison unless they're regenerating. You can do similar things with the Serpent Kriss. The Serpent Kriss is the same poison, actually. You can dual wield them. They have +2 attack and their armor piercing damage, and if they get any damage through, they apply that poison. So dual wielded Serpent Krisses on either a summoned chassis or a chassis that you have available can be a very good way to nuke even very powerful super combatants. The only issue you run into is being repelled. If you're fighting against that kind of thing, you also need to send the wielder Berserk or use some other method to boost their morale up high enough that they can win those opposed checks, which can be a little bit challenging. Speaking of Berserk, Berserking is an important part of thugging strategy in the late game. It's a lot less important in the early game, just because there aren't nearly so many good ways to do it. You can give someone the Berserker Pelt, but the Berserker Pelt has the Gone Berserk tag instead of the regular just Berserk tag, which means that they don't wait to be hit, they just start the match Berserk. They start on the battlefield. As soon as they arrive, they are Berserk, which means they can't cast spells. And since good thugs tend to be mages who use buff spells on themselves, that's not great. It's a little bit, you don't really want to give a whole lot of gear to somebody who doesn't have paths because they won't be able to use them effectively. So Berserker Pelt doesn't see a whole lot of use. Other methods of going Berserk, the classic is the Flesh Eater. The Flesh Eater is construction 4, so you can get it before thugging comes fully online at Construction 6. And the Flesh Eater gives you Berserk +3. On top of that, it's a very effective weapon, high damage, high attack bonus, and when it hits, it gives the enemy a chest wound, which gives them +5 encumbrance, and so basically makes them suck. The Flesh Eater is the weapon that you want in order to fully counter, that is, Repel-based super combatants. You have the Flesh Eater, you have something that gives you prot, and then you have a secondary weapon that either does a ton of damage or inflicts a very deleterious status effect. The Flesh Eater will send you Berserk as soon as they repel you, because what'll happen is, you'll charge in, you'll launch an attack, the enemy will repel you, you'll take 1 point of damage, go instantly Berserk, now your morale is 99. So now you can push through all subsequent repels, I guess I should say, is the pronunciation. I need to work on my pronunciation. You can now push through all subsequent repels and just do damage. You'll be taking chip damage in the process, but as long as the fight is remotely even, the Flesh Eater will turn it in your favor. The other premier anti-super combatant weapon doesn't come online till Construction 6, so it's kind of outside the remit of this video, but it's the Axe of Hate. The Axe of Hate gives you fatigue and disease, so 20 fatigue per hit, +4 attack, and it also diseases the target, albeit that can be negated by magic resistance. So somebody dual-wielding the Axes of Hate will burn down a super combatant very quickly. In fact, dual-wielded Axes of Hate, especially on a quickened thug, are one of the best counters to Phoenix Pyre super combatants. Because if you are quickened and dual-wielding Axes of Hate, you'll be inflicting about 80 fatigue per round. You won't be able to wield a Flesh Eater unless you have 3 arms, so you won't be able to be Berserk through that method. You'll have to have some other method of going Berserk. But double Axes of Hate are one of the ways to kill Laestrygonians, that one-on-one that could potentially work. It'd still be hard, because Laestrygonians get so many attacks. But potentially, you could push their fatigue up high enough that the Phoenix Pyre wouldn't activate, and then if they die once, they die in real life. So in any case, like I said, that's out of the remit of this video, because it's Construction 6, and we're kind of focusing on lower levels. But to recap, early game thugs are very specialized. There's a relatively limited selection of items that are actually good and efficient for early game Construction 2, Construction 4 thugs. Some of them are national items, like the Armor of the 5 Elements is really good. It gives you very low defense penalty, relatively low encumbrance, it gives you magic resistance, it gives you a little bit of resilience against every element, and it's cheap. Armor of the 5 Elements is solid. It's a shame that early and middle-aged Tianqi don't have even slightly functional thug chassis, but late-aged Tianqi kinda sorta does if you wanted to do that. In any case, Bracers of Protection, very solid item. Great Swords of Sharpness, excellent anti-thug item. Do not use these against armies, that's not what they're for. They're for killing giants, and most thugs, or cavalry, basically something that's relying on you not hitting them in order to make the most of a limited HP pool, which is basically what thugs are. If you're building early game super combatants, lead shields are fantastic because they give you magic resistance, and if you're worried about like mind burn spam or potentially soul slay, something like that, that extra 4 points of magic resistance can be key. The Stone Bird, excellent repel tool in addition to the Enchanted Pike. If you stack both of those on one unit, they will be a repel machine as long as you also remember to boost their attack to sufficient levels. Blacksteel items, the Blacksteel trinkets here, the full plate, or actually more likely the Blacksteel plate, the standard one. Good solid armor, low defense penalty, good protection, not very expensive. This one's solid. Blacksteel full plate, less so. It's very high protection, but it's also a high defense penalty and encumbrance, so I wouldn't necessarily. That's for specialty use only. Mainly on Earth Mages who can cast Summon Earth Power to negate some of the penalties. Blacksteel helmet, good solid protection, no real downsides, but no bonuses. I would prefer a horned helmet. A horned helmet, probably the premier early game helmet just because it gives you an extra attack. However, a case can be made for the dragon helmet, because the dragon helmet gives you +5 morale, a little bit of fire resistance, and dark vision, which can be situationally useful. The +5 morale is by far the biggest issue there. In any case, early game thugging is, even more than late game thugging, really a question of countermeasures. If you have somebody sending thugs against you, your goal will be to figure out, okay, what's the cheapest and easiest way to counter what he's relying on? Because with early game gear, you can only really be relying on 1 or 2 defenses. You don't have the breadth of power to boost everything simultaneously, and you don't have the buff spells necessary to cast all these layered defenses that late game thugs tend to rely on. So if you can break through defense and prot, or defense and mist form, or something like that, you're very likely to be able to kill them. The trick is just figuring out what it is that they're using, and what's the most effective way to get through that, whether it's using a Frost Brand for the guaranteed magical hit, using a Great Sword of Sharpness for the high attack, high damage armor piercing, whether it's stacking attacks and defense with dual wielding main gouches and bracers of protection. Whatever it is you choose to do, there's several different options, but you can really only do one at a time. So, hopefully this has been useful. Perun, I hope this has sort of fulfilled your goals in hearing me talk about this. I'd love to give a lot more specific examples. I don't really have time right now, but I may do that in a follow-up video here. It would be interesting to dive in and kind of talk about what all the greatest and cheapest and most efficient early game thugs are. So maybe we'll do that in a follow-up. That would be interesting. In any case, thank you so much for watching. Thanks to Perun for sponsoring this video, and I will see you all next time.